The government promised us one nation, one tax. We've had 3 GST Council meetings so far between the central finance ministers and the finance ministry officials and all the state finance ministers, and it looks like that we might in fact be ending up with one nation, many taxes. These are the 5 key takeaways from those 3 meetings and everything that's gone on the sidelines. For instance, it now seems that the council is considering 4 slab rates. That's 6%, that's the low rate, 12% and 18% as alternate standard rates, and 26% as the high rate for sin goods, luxury goods, demerit goods, however you call it. More surprisingly, outside of the fact that we have 4 rates, is the conversation around cess, which came back up in the second and the third meeting, and it now seems that we are not going to be able to get rid of cess at all, despite moving to GST. The third one, and this is what you'll pick up from all the conversations you have with industry, is a complaint that government is not engaging enough with industry, definitely not taking enough feedback on board. The fourth one, I'm not sure it's a statement or a question. April 1st was the deadline that the finance minister Arun Jaitley said he would like to achieve, and that's the best effort that the finance ministry is putting forward. But given the last 3 meetings and the fact that we still don't have any finality on what the GST rate structure will be, is that April 1st, 2017 deadline achievable? And the final question, at the end of all of this, if we are going to have a dual GST system, 4 slabs, some cesses, and God knows what other complications, is this the GST that India deserves? These are the questions that we're going to discuss today on The Fine Print. Hello and welcome to Bloomberg Quint. I have with me 2 very well-known tax lawyers to answer some of these questions and tell you what kind of GST it looks like we're ending up with. Rohan Shah, an advocate, and we have Badri, who's been a GST favorite here on Facebook and on Twitter. Badri is from Lakshmi Kumar and Sridharan. Gentlemen, thank you to both of you for joining us here on Bloomberg Quint. I'm going to start first by asking you, Rohan, were you surprised when you heard that the proposal was for 4 slab rates, 6%, 12%, 18% and 26%? Were you expecting that to happen?
Yeah, I was certainly expecting that there will be multiple tiers in terms of the taxation. I didn't ever expect that it would only be sort of 2 slabs. And I think there are several reasons why you need to sort of have these rates. So one situation, if you see, is there is this big buzz about whether or not GST is going to have an inflationary trend. And that sort of dovetails into what is the impact of that inflationary trend on the next election. So that's one level of anxiety. The other is, will you collect enough revenue for both the state and the center to meet their targets and their ambitions? And then, after all of this, will the nation sort of have the whole economic dividend in terms of the GDP growth that we are expecting?
Correct.
Now, if you have to balance all of these factors, which are not all reconciled, then you will really have to look at a spread of rates. So for example, the 12, what's the significance of the 12? If, as they're saying, almost 70% or more of the CPI basket goes into the 12, then that's one way for you to really curb the whole inflationary trend, because you've got a lot of what the common man consumes in the bracket of 12. And if you can control the inflation, then hopefully you answered the political question as well. You will need the 18, because part of what happens through the 18 process and what happens probably through the 26 or 40 process determines the extent of your revenue collection, and that goes back to what the states and the center want. So if you look at this rate structure, given all of the pulls and pushes that we have and the pressures that they are facing, I don't think this is irrational. This is pretty much to be expected. The hope is that this is really phase 1 GST, where you will have these rates, and over a period of time they will get attenuated, and you will get down to maybe just 2-3 blocks. But to begin, I don't believe you could have had anything other than something like this, and certainly just 2 rates, probably completely impossible.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, and Badri, this is the same question I want to put to you as well, and that is that I get maybe that the circumstances, and then the compulsions or the constraints within which we are bringing in GST require 4 slab rates, but is this not going to mean that we already have a dual GST? There is all this, pull and push between, again, where will the center have a say, or which taxpayers will it have control over, which taxpayers will the state have control over? I'm trying to use de-jargonized language in saying this. Are you not going to then have a lot of difference of opinion between taxpayers and the taxing authority on which goods fall into what rates, and therefore maybe more litigation on which goods fall into what rates. Is that not going to be the outcome of having that many rates out there? Ron?
Yeah. So certainly when you have that many rates, there is always this risk that classification disputes will continue to remain in the system. What of course is happening right now is the rate structure. How you will basket products and what will go under what rate will ultimately determine whether you're going to get classification disputes. So for example, if you look at the structure of the tariffs that we've had, if entire chapters sort of go into one rate, then you're really not going to have classification disputes, because normally your classification dispute is that in a generic group, are you type A or are you type B? But if everything in the generic group is at the same rate, then the potential for classification disputes is a little lesser. So a spread of rates would generally indicate classification disputes, but the key issue now is basketing. What will go under what rate? Because that A determines the impact on industries, B, it determines the size of your grey market. Because there will be some products that if you place them in the wrong rate, you will get an implosion in terms of the grey market. And then you will also therefore determine, are you going to really see classification disputes? Or if generically you're quite clear, then people will get slotted in as they should, and there won't be so many disputes.
Batri, before you answer that, I just some of the information I was picking up, I was trying to talk to some of the state finance ministers and their consultants and advisors, and there's been some argument on really what is a sin good, what should be the demerit good, sort of definition, if one may call it that, or what is really a luxury good in this country, right? And I think there's been a lot of debate on how much can you classify as luxury good and therefore push into the highest rate bracket, which currently is proposed at 26%. We don't know what it will say, because I think the Arvind Subramaniam panel report had said 40%, right? So we don't know what the final rate will be. But if you have so many rates, despite the constraints, will governments, center, state, otherwise, or however, whoever determines this, not then be tempted into pushing a large number of goods into a 26% bracket, which they would not have done if the demerit rate was 40, right? Same thing between what goes under the standard rate of 12% and what goes under the standard rate of 18%. The government will want to push many more goods maybe into 18%. Industry will probably want to find ways around that and say, but my goods belong to 12%. How do you respond to the rate issue?
So, just like Rohan said, my sense is that having 4 slab structure, like you said, is going to have some amount of litigation with respect to classification.
Correct.
There's no question about it. Multiple rates have always led to classification disputes. On the issue of demerit goods, I believe that ultimately, depending on how the GST Council develops itself, as well as an authoritative body which can force down its decisions on the states to say that this is a collective decision taken at the GST Council, you shall put these goods only at the demerit list or have a classification with respect to that, then you can have some control with respect to that. But if they tend to be a recommendatory body and the states are free to do what they want, then we are definitely going to have a problem. But coming back to a little bit about this, I have some real concerns on some issues. If CPI index or inflation is a real concern, 50% of the CPI index consists of food, which is not going to be taxed. It's not going to be even any of these rates. It's going to be zero.
Yeah, in fact, if I recall Mr. Adia's comment, he said the entire CPI basket of items will in fact be exempt. That's what he said on the sidelines. Now,
I'm not sure that will happen.
Look, there's a lot of communication going on right now. I'm not taking everything at face value.
I believe that, for example, CPI index, 50% is going to be exempt. 32% of the CPI index is on concessionally taxed rates right now.
Okay.
So they're probably going to be slotting somewhere between 6% and 12%. But again, these are all fairly important things, but not a very large group of and probably you can between 0 and 12 or 0 and 6 or whatever number you can have that fixed. 18% is probably something which is going to be fixed for services, and there's somewhere between 18 and 0, which is 12, which is mooted, which now we have a 6 between 0 and the 12. 12 really should have taken care of the 32%, the majority of the CPI index, and that would have kept the inflation to a level where you could have controlled it, and then really gone with an 18% standard rate for most goods. And then by having 18% and 12% applied for goods, and having a different rate for goods and services, I believe, is a piece of concern.
Okay.
Because
And they're clear that services will all be at 18. They
Looks like
seem to have
that. They seem to
communicated
have
that, but I'm saying that's how everybody
So it
understands
could be as simple as that. For example, there could be goods, electronic goods, which could be at 12%.
Right.
If it is bought, it's at 12%, but if it's leased, it's a service at 18%. So you can have a real problem, not even just of classification, but of the way the transactions are, and business are very complex now. It's not so simple. So yeah, but having said that, yes, they have the constraints of having to fit them in some of this, and we'll have a better idea once we have the next round of meetings. But according to me, if you're going to have this, and if there's also going to be some bands around this, say 1%, 2%, if you read the select committee, we talk about allowing them 1% above and below to compensate for things like entry taxes and stuff like that, then you could have a much more spectrum of rates.
Which is worse, I would
which
imagine.
Could be worse.
Yeah. Okay. Even if you were to be able to swallow 6%, 12%, 18%, 26%, all the 5 items that are outside GST, those that may be exempt. So now you have various categories of goods and some categories of services and various ways of taxing them. How do you come to terms with or reconcile yourself with the fact that we are now also talking about a potential cess? The whole promise of GST was do away with multiplicity of taxes, definitely do away with the cascading effect. And now we have the central government saying, hey, look, the cesses may continue, or we may continue to impose cesses so as to be able to raise funds to compensate the states for any revenue loss in the transition to GST. Cess is a 4-letter word, isn't this, in the GST framework altogether?
And this is one of the first things which is objected by the states. Cess is a very very difficult topic. Like you said, it's a 4-letter word. The issue is that it doesn't fall under the purview of the GST Council. So the state union centers is got almost a free
So
hand.
who decides to impose? This will be the center will be deciding
This
to
will be a
impose.
center. It will be a decision by the center.
The center will decide unilaterally to impose a cess?
The center will decide unilaterally to decide the cess, right?
Okay.
Cess will be outside this purview.
Okay.
It will be applied outside this system. And it could range from, it could be a very small percentage which is applied on.
And it could be 1, 2, 3, 4 cesses, is
and
it?
it could be. Or
so it could be unending. I mean, at the end of the day, if the center feels it's not collecting enough revenue from GST, it could keep applying cess. We've seen road cess, environment cess, all of that is what we suffer right now.
All of the cesses are likely to, may continue and may come back in the new regime. But again, it has to be a balancing exercise, because obviously the center is concerned that if the revenue which they are putting as targets for compensation for the states exceeds what they need to pay, because because it's all a compromise at this stage.
Sure.
Nobody knows at what rate India is going to grow for the next few years.
Yes.
We might
really what the expansion of the base will be because of GST. So, I get that.
If the cess is really used as a mechanism in control and not extensively used, or is limited to certain goods which are considered truly as luxury goods or goods which are polluting in nature, then they might be able to justify and get away with it. But still, it's a big problem for industry to comply with it. It's a big problem.
Because you don't get any credit for cess, right?
It's
not offsettable.
It's a completely, it's not governed by any principles. It's almost discretionary as to how you want to bring it. And more difficult it is, it leads to kind of differential taxes again, and then propensity to kind of move from one to the other. It also leads to litigation where it's challenged again and again and again.
Yeah.
So it's not a great thing.
Well, you're putting it mildly. We've had sterner, stronger commentary come in on cess, and I suspect. Are you comfortable with the whole concept of cess? Even though we all understand that they may need to raise funds, should they be doing it through a cess or cesses?
So 3 issues which really trouble me. So the first situation is that you have to fund compensation is not something which has dawned on you at this point.
Absolutely, yeah.
Compensation has been a central issue since the time that a GST has been debated.
Absolutely.
So if today you're going to come around and say that, hey, I need a cess to really be able to pay for this, and who decides? The payer decides with the payee that we need a cess, which, in terms of having a cozy arrangement, you couldn't have a cozy arrangement, right? We will all decide that we will tax these guys and we will pay each other. So firstly, I'm a little surprised that you're talking of source of funds as being a fundamental enough issue in the debate that it actually will decide what are the slabs and what are the rates. I think it's very, very late in the day to sort of make that a central issue. The second is, I think it really badly impinges on the credibility of the GST process.
Right.
When for years you keep on saying that all cesses are subsumed, and then you come back and say, hey, I think I got my arithmetic wrong, and therefore I now need a source of fund issues, and therefore I'm now going to bring a cess, I think it speaks directly to the credibility of what is the GST. The third issue is, if the state now says that you as the center decided when you wanted more revenue that you could have a cess,
Yes.
why is it that I am constrained from, let us say I have drought, I have anything that I believe is compelling enough
Yeah.
in terms of what are my sovereign concerns as a state,
Right.
and therefore I want to bring in something, then have we not sort of opened up the door in terms of saying that right in the center of what is a GST, in the womb of the GST is a cess which is going to be over and above the GST.
Yeah.
So, you know,
So I just want to clarify one more thing. Are states allowed to, under GST, impose any entry taxes? Has that been fully subsumed or not? Is it subsumed or not?
So entry 52 has been deleted, therefore it's been subsumed.
So they are not allowed to impose any entry taxes.
They will not have the power.
So what kind of additional cess-like tax could they impose if they feel encouraged by the centre's move to impose a cess? Do they have any flexibility to do
For
it?
example, you have transport taxes, right? So it's a transport tax. Now, if we see this scheme of what is left out, municipal levies are left out, panchayat levies are left out. So a state does not only act through the machinery of the state government, it can effectively act through any of the modalities which function under it to say here is an ability for me to bring a tax. So panchayati tax, a municipal tax. The problem is that the moment you say that GST subsumes everything, but need based you can go above and beyond GST, then really you've opened Pandora's box in terms of saying where will this go?
Okay.
Which is why I think there is such a strong resistance that you are really fundamentally putting a question mark in terms of the whole credibility of the GST process.
Okay, I just want to remind our viewers that we are with two tax experts here talking about the sort of net outcome of the 3 GST Council meetings that have been taking place so far, the key takeaways from those meetings, and really what kind of GST design we're likely to end up with, which is not to suggest that we have the final contours of the design, we're only simply taking stock. If you have any questions, please do make sure that you write it right there at the bottom of the box on the Facebook page or on the Periscope or Twitter page. But, you know, speaking of 4 slabs of rates, 6, 12, 18, 26, and now the cess, the one question I know that every single audience member will have is, effectively, is this going to mean that when you add all of this up together, I am going to pay more tax, right? And that I'm wondering, even though the central government and the finance minister have said ad nauseum, we do not want to create an inflationary impact through GST, if you end up putting a large number of goods as luxury goods into the 26% bracket, if you end up imposing a cess over and above that because you've got to take care of the paranoia of states, are we going to end up having to pay higher taxes as consumers? Badri, is there any way to offer an answer to that question?
So, I want to make 2 comments with respect to this. One is this fear that there's going to be cess on a large group of goods. And therefore, and there's going to be a large set of group of goods that are going to be in the luxury item, and therefore the demerit list.
I'm just putting out
saying that
hypothesis.
That hypothesis, I mean, there are hypotheses and there are hypotheses that may not be very true. I don't believe that the government will make a fundamental mistake of putting a large number of goods and commodities in that demerit list.
Something out there which says 25% of the goods will potentially go there.
Into 26%. So can I tell you, this is exactly what I picked up in the conversations we had, that what Bihar considers luxury goods is maybe not what Tamil Nadu considers luxury goods, and therefore Bihar is saying, I don't care how many goods you put into 26%, you give me flexibility on 6%. Tamil Nadu is saying something else. So
I don't think you sort of are going to have a Bihar versus Tamil Nadu.
no, I'm not saying they're going to be separate baskets. I'm just saying this is the
but
push and pull in before classification.
The concern is that the moment you start talking of luxury, conspicuous, whatever, you actually move into a realm which is undefined. Sin goods as a category is at least understood. Consensually, people will tell you it's tobacco, alcohol, whatever.
Fine.
It's a small list. And it's a list where the consumption patterns, etc., don't seem to change too much with the taxation.
So yeah, great.
Okay. But when you now get a completely new driver, which is luxury or conspicuous, there is no determinant of that. So there are people who are giving examples of fridges.
Yes, I heard that as well.
Air conditioners,
Yes.
washing machines. Now in this day and age, can you really say
That a refrigerator is
that these are luxuries, or given the pattern of how people consume and how people live, this is something which is absolutely required. So your key issue is not going to be state versus state, but who's going to decide this? Jaitley said that what goods go in which rate I will not decide, nor will this council decide. That we are going to have a support team. Yeah, we will have a support team.
Won't the council have to sign off on that classification?
The situation is right now, his understanding and everybody's understanding is that there will be a support team, conceivably of bureaucrats who will get in and say this goes here, this goes there.
Which is all fine, but won't the GST council have to sign off on that classification? Isn't this within the purview of the council?
I still feel, I don't know, subject to correction, Rohan, that I know there is always the concept of what is luxury for somebody who's going to draft this may be very different from what would be seen in a middle class family and so on and so forth. I just don't see the government being able to push too much of that into the demerit list. I don't know. Maybe I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, you hope you're right.
You
hope you're right. You hope we are wrong because of the fears.
Second issue with this is that generally why it's a very easy thing to say luxury goods is because otherwise GST is considered to be a regressive tax, right? So GST is a regressive tax because it tends to tax the poor and the rich the same way, and therefore by kind of spinning it as a luxury item and then trying to tax it, it kind of works on that magic.
You're creating then economic classification in this, right? Yeah.
And that's where I have a problem with respect to how you're going to do
Okay,
that.
before both of you continue this, I just we have a couple of questions coming in from you viewers. There is R.R. Navandar who has asked the question, and in a sense he's asking a question I asked earlier. Is it possible that which is luxury in West Bengal is need in Maharashtra? How is this going to be classified, right? Another question coming in from Rajat 36 saying putting GST at a higher rate is a lack of vision. The tax will double due to the parallel economy that may get created because of this. Again, I ask you a very simple question. Based on these design elements, is my tax outgo as a consumer going to increase?
Completely depends upon how they will actually basket the products under each of the rates. But
you have some insight into how they're looking at that, so I'm asking you, based on your insight, does it look to you that refrigerators, TVs, electronic devices are all going to go into the 26% bracket?
The situation is, I think this is still a debate. What is completely clear is that they want to try and focus as much as is of the consumption of the poor and the middle class between 6 and 12.
So does the middle class eat packaged food? Does the middle class go to restaurants? Will those things be considered middle class? Will they be considered upper middle class? Will those things then suffer with higher rates and more cesses?
So to come back to your point, that will I pay more? It again depends on who is I. If I likes a very large car, then I will pay more. If I is a person who in a normal consumption pattern consumes normal things, which
is a refrigerator normal? Will it be at 26%?
So I'm saying today the suggestion is that it will go to 26. As people sort of debate it, and the whole power of this system is that people are going to share their views. Unfortunately, many of those views only happen to be within government. So I don't ultimately see that you will get a refrigerator in 26, etc. I think they will use it more cautiously.
Yeah.
But it is a buffer between two things. Just a list of 4 in sin and their ability to tax more.
Yeah.
Now how much more, I think we are sometimes also apt to be a little paranoid in terms of how much more.
Okay, quick last comment on this issue because we have 2-3 more issues we want to cover.
One question I
quick
wanted
time.
to ask was we are so paranoid about these rates. Today, a manufacturer pays 12.5% excise duty and pays about 12.5% of VAT.
25.
So 25% is what they pay at the initial where the maximum value.
So then let's stick to today's structure. Why are we moving to GST and
GST
everything else incumbent with it?
No, I think GST in the long run is a real game changer, Menaka, whatever happens, because I believe then in the long run, if we get the rates right, and the rates initially may not be right, it'll get sorted over the next couple of years. You will see, I feel, a reduction in the medium to long term of goods and the benefits which come along with GST, more transparency and all of that.
Ultimately, a lot of analysis tells you that the entrenched trail of indirect taxes in most transactions is between 24 to 32%. Okay, that is the burden that industry and consumers
are bearing right now.
Today. So, put it in perspective to say if that is where you are, and
then
if this is where you're going,
then this doesn't look so bad.
Then it is not so bad, because what is now happening is we are sort of really reacting on a linear basis. We only either talk of excise or we only talk of VAT, whereas most manufactured products will effectively bear both. And don't forget, to the extent of the elements of inputs which are not capable of credit today, VAT is not capable.
Sure.
That again builds on. So, let's not get lost in this whole situation.
Okay, fair enough. It's a point well taken that whatever this turns out to be, this is still looking a shade better than what we have currently. All right. One of the other things that I keep picking up from industry is the government is engaging, but it doesn't seem to be engaging with the attempt to get any feedback or incorporate that feedback into the way they're designing the, for instance, the model laws, etc. They're quite literally coming and telling us what they think the model law ought to be. Yeah, I think we had a representative of the Finance Ministry in Mumbai very recently, talking about this, interacting with industry, and a couple of things that came through from that, which is that it seems that the final version of the GST law, the model law, is not going to be placed in the public for any kind of further feedback. It will now simply go straight to the Parliament to get legislated. That seems to be the message he has communicated. I don't know if it will get translated into reality. When asked about multiple registration, it seems the government said there will be no centralized registration mechanism. There will have to therefore be registration at every branch or every point, in that sense. There are a variety of other issues I could lift, but I do want to ask you guys if you think that industry point of view is being taken on board. Rohan?
I don't think in the degree of detail that it should. So what you're getting is interactions, people go in, a lot of people are met, it's half an hour, 45 minutes, then you're told come back with a 2-pager, maximum 2-pager.
Data.
Let us know what you think. The situation is that many of these businesses are extremely, extremely complex. And they have been in an entrenched tax system for the last 60 odd years. So from your perspective here, the situation is you need to ultimately have a law that people can live with. And I think what is happening at this point in time is that the nature of the consultation is neither detailed enough nor qualitative enough for you to really capture all of the issues which come up. And from that perspective, see, right now, as a nation, we have a twofold obsession with GST, date and rate. Date and rate are easy fixes, right? What you will have to live with for the next 50 years is the law, its interpretation, its administration.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if we don't invest enough energy, both in terms of government and in terms of industry, into that process, we will live with a law that we don't like. And this is really an opportunity to create a law which subsumes all of the problems and subserves this whole big thing that you want, which is great growth, because GST is an engine for growth.
Yeah, it seems you agree, Badri. We've got the winter session of Parliament that's been advanced so that all of this can move faster and that Mr. Jaitley can achieve that April 1st deadline. I'm just worried, has anybody had a chance to get a sense of what the government's thinking is as it puts together the final version of that law?
I think to some extent, I think industry is also to be blamed. I think the industry went really hard at the government to want GST. I don't think the industry at some level, when it got caught in the euphoria of GST, really understood what it means
the
to
complexity
get GST,
of it
complexity
all.
of GST. Especially we have seen fairly senior people who probably don't get involved in the day-to-day operations because, like he said, for the last 60 years we have an entry system. Excise, with all its flaws, has been in place for 60 years. We've had litigations, a lot of the issues have got sorted, a lot of things have been there. So you don't get those day-to-day pinpricks going all the way up. But the people on top, the management really went hard in getting GST. And now when GST is coming out and when the information started coming out, they've been the ones who've been taken a little bit shocked by this.
We've
this
already
thing.
started getting all these industry,
having
sort
said
of
that,
lobbying notes saying we want our products to be treated in X bracket and Y bracket. And I know the Gems and Jewelry, sort of industry association the other day said gold should be treated like this and not like this. So clearly, it's only now that they're waking up to realize what the impact is going to be.
And they probably not realize. We are still looking at probably 10%, 15%, which is going to affect me immediately at the very high level. Like you said, date and rate, value, what will be the thing, credit, and so on and so forth. But there are so many other issues which will not be addressed right now, which the industry will not understand. And the first 2-3 years are going to be this thing. Now, ideally, I would have liked to have had 18 months to 2 years to have that transition.
But we are not going to have anything close to that, right?
True, but what I'm saying is that we are, like you said, are we going to get the best GST? I don't know. But to some extent, industry should have its fair share because they really went hard at wanting GST at different forums, right?
Just give you an example, right? Very recently, after 67 odd years, for the first time they brought excise duty on gems and jewelry. It had a certain sort of social outpouring. Happened. To meet that, they actually set up a committee. The committee devoted 60 odd days, wrote up a law, which ultimately sort of seemed to balance whatever was needed to be balanced. How much? So you got a law. How much of that law will translate into GST? Was that effort worthwhile? Are all those nuances that you spend so much time addressing no longer relevant? So, when you say that, oh, these guys want so and so on gold or so and so on this, ultimately, they are the industry they are. If they deserved 60 to 90 days just 3 months ago,
then why don't they
deserve
do
9 minutes? What is the process we're talking about?
Okay, so I suspect this inability to engage further with industry is all because we are running towards this April 1st deadline, right? So here's a question which can have only a one-word answer from either one of you, and which is, are we going to meet April 1st? Rohan? You need to say it loudly. You can't just nod your head like, disapprovingly. Are we going to meet the April 1st deadline?
I don't think you're going to meet April 1st, 2017, but it's important. You'll need something beyond the one word. I think government will be ready by about the 15th of January or there.
Hopefully.
They will then give you, as industry, 6 months to say migrate. And in that budget, there will be something to say, we are ready, we've done everything. Industry asked for more time. It's a valid request and we are giving 6 months more.
They have to finish this before September, right?
They have to finish it before September.
So it's sometime, if it's not April 1st, then it's sometime between April and September.
True,
is that still enough time for industry?
I don't think
you just said what, 18 months to 2 years or something like that?
18 months to 2 years would be ideal for you to transition because it gives you enough time to understand what the law is, be able to provide inputs, proper inputs, have people who understand and who have kind of studied the law, interpreted the law, administered the law, kind of give very good feedback. Today we just have people who are looking at their industry, giving some feedback.
And
18 months wasn't enough for Malaysia. They gave 18 months and still had disaster. So I think pretty much the situation is, look at VAT, look at anything else, which was equally transformational. The situation is, you will bring it in and then everybody will learn a few lessons on the go as you are living in the law. All the lessons are not going to be learned pre-law. And that I think will be the approach. We are giving you a law, we are giving you 6 months to migrate, pretty much it will probably come by July or maybe at the latest September. Get as ready as you can. It's not going to be an ideal law, it's not going to be an ideal transition, but we are a nation who will learn as we go along.
And the problem also is that you're talking about this law. I believe that as we are going to implement, you're thinking we're going to implement, we'll have 4 months, 6 months. As we are going to implement, the law will keep changing because you'll have instructions, you will have amendments, you will have clarifications, you'll suddenly realize this is not working. So as you're running this race with your hands tied behind your back, you'll also have to go through a kind of a hurdle.
So I like how sanguine the two of you are in describing this motley process in which we are going to adopt GST, which is this big promised reform that's supposed to simplify taxation, take away the cascading effect, boost GDP. Are we going to get any of that with this structure? And how long? If we are going to get it, are we going to get it in the first 5 years, 4 years, 10 years, 15 years?
So if you take service
Is this the GST we deserve?
So I'll tell you one thing. So for example, if you take service tax, which is also took about 20 years for us to understand. One good thing which the government did, I believe, is that whenever there was an issue, they addressed it quickly and they brought in clarification of some sort where industry could look at it, figure out and then move on from there. So I do believe the GST, or once the actual implementation and the first half goes through, you'll have a lot more of the people working to kind of fix it as quickly as possible. And I do believe that GST in this form is still going to be better than what we have currently.
In this half-baked form?
In this half-baked form
or
also.
Or quarter-baked form, because we don't really know whether it will be half or quarter or three-quarter baked.
And I do believe that it will improve. And it will improve fairly quickly, but it will take a year or so. But I do believe it will work. But it's not going to be there on 1st of April or 1st of July, whatever.
Or 1st of September, if that's the case. Is this the GST we deserve, Rohan? We've been talking of this reform for I don't know how long, you know, 10 years and more.
So to me, let me take your headline and let me take, is this the GST we deserve? Is this one tax, one nation? It is one tax. Whether you like it or not, a series of taxes are going to collapse into the GST. Is this ideal? It is far from ideal. Okay. Does anyone anywhere have an ideal system of GST? Probably in an economy like Switzerland,
Australia.
Or whatever, you know, you have something
Probably
which is
closest.
ideal. A, given the nature of the economy, given the mindset of the taxpayer and the tax collector both. So from our perspective, is this the GST India deserves? The question to ask is, you had about 12 years to get this right. Okay. It's always been work in progress. Right now, even if you get a GST, which is 70% there, is it worth having that or saying that I want no GST? And speaking to all of the issues you mentioned, you know, economic benefits, etc., I still think that even if you get a 70% GST, it is a better situation than what you're living with right now. And you get 70, sad as it is to say, we should have got 100, it will improve over time.
Okay, I'll let that be the last word on this discussion, but definitely not the last word on our series of GST debates. The next GST Council meet is in the first week of November, so we will see what develops then. Thank you very much, Rohan Badri, for joining us today here on Bloomberg Quint and the Fine Print, and thank you very much for watching. Keep your questions coming because we'll continue to cover GST over the weeks and months to come.